And you've also mentioned in previous that the right candidate is also someone that slightly as a child, because I do remember you said there's three segments when you're growing up that forms your character,
Correct.
and the ones that have a small traumatic effect, but
Correct.
not too traumatic, where you become alcohol dependent,
Right.
but just enough. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, what you're talking about is childhood trauma. And this goes beyond just espionage. This is applicable in all fields of business, right? Essentially, what we're talking about is people who are high performers. High performers rule the world. They're the professional athletes, they're the successful billionaires, they're the people who run businesses, they're the ones who become, C-suite executives. That's a high performer. CIA also recruits high performers. But the difference between them and corporate America is that CIA understands what to look for in a person before they become a success. And that magic element, that secret sauce that they have that so few other people realize, is that high performance is tied to childhood trauma. And that's empirical evidence. There's studies out there that show it. There's an actual chemical change in your brain during your formative childhood years that make it so that you are essentially committed, like addicted to seeking approval and validation. If you don't have childhood trauma, you don't have that chemical addiction. Like if your parents love you and everybody's there for you and life is easy, you actually feel like, I don't need to prove myself. I don't need to make anybody happy. But when you don't have that, right? When dad doesn't pay attention to you because he's addicted to work, or when, mom has too many kids and she has to, you're stuck getting whatever attention you can get because she's taking care of three other kids at the same time. Or when you have, a parent that dies at a young age, or when you have divorce when you're a child, like these things cause, like what you were mentioning, the exact right combination of childhood trauma events that program into your young cognitive mind this need for validation and constant approval.
That explains a lot.
Right? So once you see it, you realize how it applies to you.
It's a dopamine sensor. It's knowing that you have to get the attention and go above and beyond to be rewarded, basically.
Correct. And that becomes a predictable, trainable element within your psyche.
Yeah.
Whereas if somebody doesn't have childhood trauma, or to your point, if they have too much trauma, when people have too much trauma, they've been sexually abused when they were kids, maybe they were violently kidnapped or something like that. When they have too much trauma, it actually ends up souring the amygdala, which is your fight or flight response in your brain. It creates essentially PTSD. And then your brain doesn't work in a neurologically normal way. And then you turn to coping mechanisms to offset what your brain doesn't do. That's where your drug addicts come from, and your sex addicts come from, and your opioid addicts come from. People create addictions to offset what their brain doesn't naturally do. So it really is about finding that perfect cocktail. CIA knows how to recruit people who have that perfect cocktail.
If you could create that cocktail for kids, that would create superstars.
Yeah, but that's at the same time what we're saying there.
Yeah,
is we have to traumatize kids.
Yeah, it's bad. Yeah, but there's no, I don't mean I don't mean that at all. But I'm just saying that secret sauce somehow kind of carry that into another way where you can, I guess, have the same results without the traumatic event.
Or you don't even ever try to create the results. Instead, you try to source places where it's already happening.
Because we're as parents, we want to coddle our kids and work hard enough to make weak humans, basically, right?
We try to make their life easier.
Yeah, and in turn, it makes it harder on them later. What do they say? They say that that great men make weak men. Great men make great times make weak men make
weak times,
hard times, and hard times make great men, right?
Exactly.
And it's kind of that
vicious cycle.
The cycle of that thing. So, but yeah, finding a balance is obviously key. That's interesting, though, that they know.
And how are they, I guess, finding that?
So what they look for is they look for people who are in that sweet spot of 25 to 35. That's the range that they usually recruit from. They recruit from the military. They recruit from corporate America. They recruit from all over, every dimension.
Oh, so there's no specific
But what they're looking for is a history of indicators, right? So usually you can see high performers because they are high achievers in their GPA. They're high achievers in athletics. They're high achievers in, the universities that they go to, the jobs that they hold. Like when you find somebody who goes to business school to study marketing, and then they enter like a mid-sized marketing company, that's not your high achiever. Your high achiever is the person who comes from a rural school in Missouri, somehow got a scholarship to play soccer at a school in Utah, and then goes on to study, marketing, and then takes a high-paying firm, a high-paying job in a New York firm. That's the person who's worked their ass off.
Yeah.
Why would that one person work their ass off in essentially the exact same field as somebody else who's not working their ass off?
They got something to prove.
They got a chip on their shoulder. They have childhood trauma.